Now, the farmers are refusing to give up again, as once again they fight the new inheritance tax rules brought in at the last budget. And this time, over 150 tractors, as you can see on your screens there, headed to the port of Dover to protest against the inheritance tax raid and the importing of what they have described as substandard food from overseas. Well, to discuss this, I'm delighted to say I'm joined by the co-founder of the Together movement, that's Alan Miller, who's been busy at those protests today. And of course, I'm still joined by my panel. That's the former Chancellor and Conservative MP, Kwasi Kwarteng, and the former Labour MP, Lloyd Russell-Moyle. Alan, welcome to the show. First of all, well done for getting Jeremy Clarkson to carry one of your Together banners. Now, you were right in there in London, this time Dover, in London, quite gentlemanly. Queensberry rules. What was the mood like down in Dover? And do you think there could be a more militant whiff in the air?
I think the thing is, Martin, that we're seeing really diligent, brilliant backbone of British people that are fed up and furious, very professional, very well organised, very can-do. They are determined to have their voices heard. They're making that case. They're organising diligently. We've seen it in Wales as well with Gareth Wyn-Jones and others. And I think that over 150 tractors coming out around Dover, they demonstrate their capability to actually, if they want to, they could shut things down. But they also love the public and the public loves them. And I think that the message is coming through loud and clear to Rachel Reeves and the government. If they were smart, the government would say, you know what, we've listened to you. Let's see if we can work this out. But I think that they're doubling down and people are being contemptuous of the farmers, and they've made a big mistake because the British public love our farmers. And we at Together are saying that across business, citizens, drivers, haulage, and of course our farmers, we're all in solidarity together on this one, right? It's about food security, it's about decency, it's about not having impositions just done, carte blanche, when you say in advance you're not going to do something before an election and then you do it. It goes to the heart of a lot of concerns in Britain right now. And
we saw pictures on screen there, perhaps we can get them back up, of the tractors going around central Dover. They're not causing obstructions, they're moving with the traffic. I understand the police were informed. So again, a show of force, as we can see on the screen there, a lot of heavy plant machinery moving about, but things are still moving. No signs yet of any of that kind of message of blockading. But, Alan Miller, go back to the year 2000. The farmers then were hammered by a fuel duty hike by the Tony Blair government. Tony Blair, the most popular Prime Minister, new Prime Minister in history at that time, something which Sir Keir Starmer could only dream of. They teamed together with the haulage workers. They blockaded ports. Soon, supermarket shelves were empty. Tony Blair suffered a 25% decrease in his popularity in 1 week. Tony Blair did a U-turn. The farmers and the haulage workers, they got a victory. With all that in mind, do you think there is appetite to escalate this, to start getting a bit more gilets jaunes?
I think, Martin, we're going to see much more action. I've said about the previous ones in Wales. We know that we're talking to people. There's going to be activity in counties and in towns and cities and coastal regions up and down the country, and people are uniting around this. There's going to be much more going on. And if people are not listened to, they should take note that there's determination and grit. These are people that every day, our farmers, much loved, they go out, they work hard, they demonstrate the virtues and the values of, you know, some traditional sense of what it means to hard grafters that are decent and they're providing food for us. Without them, we don't have food. We don't want to be in the position we're in with energy, where we're actually allegedly getting rid of our carbon footprint, paying for things to come from elsewhere. This is about the public also having our voices, we're saying it Together, Martin. We're encouraging your viewers and everyone to let their MPs hear from them and say, this needs to get sorted, let's back our farmers and get this fixed. But it's not just one other thing. It's not just this issue of inheritance tax, BPR and APR. It's a range of issues that we know are impacting and damaging them. Net zero, we've seen things coming down the line, fertiliser costs, all of these issues. So there's a range of things that need to be tackled. And I think this is an opening moment for a more populist response where people are going to see that people are uniting around this.
And they can get in touch with their MPs, of course, if they go to the Together declaration. There's a mechanism of getting in touch with the MPs, to all of which let's bring you in now. You gentlemen here. Lloyd, let's start with you. I know I started with Lloyd last time, but let's do it again, because back to my previous point, with the pensioners, a lot of people think they simply chose the wrong target, a vulnerable group who have worked all their lives. With farmers, we depend on farmers to literally put bacon on the table for us. Why? Why have the Labour Party gone after farmers?
I think politicians in Westminster of both parties don't, for a long time, have not understand farmers and our issues in the rural economy. And I remember sitting on the Trade Committee and Trade and Agriculture Commission telling us, well, New Zealand does lamb more environmentally and cheaper, so we should just let it all come in, without any understanding of the devastation that does in terms of food security. So there is a real problem, and that was under the Conservatives. So I think there's a real problem. And I think then a lot of farmers feel that this is a straw on the camel's back kind of thing, rather than actually this is the big problem. So what they could have done, and what they should do, and they still could do this, is they could say you're 100% inheritance relief if you don't sell the farm for 7 years or 10 years. If you do sell the farm within 10 years, basically to cash out, then actually you should be paying the full rate of inheritance tax. Okay. That, to me, would actually gain more money and be more effective.
We're dancing. So, go back in time. Back in March, there was a protest around the square out here in Westminster because the farmers were unhappy with the Conservative government at the time because they were still hammered by net zero, still hammered by all of the above, apart from this.
The big problem here is that the Labour Party went into the election and they said nothing about what they were going to do with farmers' inheritance tax. They said nothing about taking winter fuel payment from pensioners. They literally said very little about what the programme they were going to govern on. Having got in, they hammer these groups with these tax rises. There is a democratic point about this, and that's why people are very angry. I think if they'd said, look, we're going to go in and we're going to do these things, they might not have been as successful, but that would have been an honest prospectus on which to win the general election. What is very disappointing for lots of people is that they said nothing about what their plans were. And then they come in and suddenly, hey, presto, they're doing all these things, hitting these vulnerable groups. That's where a lot of the fury, I'm afraid, is coming from. And it's a specific thing about the election having happened and then a new government coming in, and the first thing they do is raise taxes.
I think it's more of a problem.
We have to move on. The owners of car maker Vauxhall have announced plans to close its company's van-making factory, sadly, in Luton, putting 1,100 jobs in grave peril. And that's just days after Ford also announced plans to cut 800 jobs at their plants. Now, the closure has been blamed on flagging electric vehicle sales and, of course, the financial penalties imposed on car companies if EV sales don't make up 22% of all sales. And don't forget, by 2030, this will rise to 80% of all sales. Now, Labour's Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds earlier on called it a dark day for Luton. But was it the punitive green targets of Labour and the Tories before them that turned off the lights and put over 1,000 people's jobs at risk? Well, let's take a listen to what the Business Secretary said earlier on today in the Commons.
Investments being made at Ellesmere Port and elsewhere demonstrate that there are real opportunities for UK manufacturing as part of the move to zero-emission vehicles. But this transition has to be properly managed, and it requires a government that's on the pitch, something the car industry finally now has in this government.
So let's see if the sparks fly in this debate. I'm joined now by A. Thomas, the founder of the World EV Day and the Electric Vehicle Advocates, and of course my electric panel, the former Chancellor and Conservative MP Kwasi Kwarteng and the former Labour MP Lloyd Russell Moore. Great stuff. A, let's start with you. Not my words, the words of the owner of this plant, Stellantis. They said the Vauxhall plant and 1,100 jobs with it has been killed by net zero.
Well, let's put this in a bit of context. Stellantis Vauxhall are still investing 50 million in their Ellesmere port plant, which is their primary production site for electric vans. The plant in Luton never produced a single electric van, so it's not really entirely an electric van or electrification issue.
But the facts of the matter are, we don't seem to be that enamoured with electric vehicles, not only in Britain, but across the European Union. BMW crying out for relief from the European Union. None is forthcoming. Porsche simply stopping to make electric vehicles altogether. The same with Volkswagen. And in America, it's the same. Meanwhile, the Chinese flooding the market with knockdown prices. We can't compete. And the fact of the matter is, Aid, whether you're an advocate or not, the British public simply don't want these vehicles.
Well, we're already at 20% 20% consumers buying electric vehicles as we get towards the end of this year. There is a 22% target, so there's a little bit of a mismatch between that, and that has some pretty severe fines for the manufacturers. So that's what's concentrating their minds. But I'm absolutely sure that we will shift into this new environment of electric vehicles. They're better cars. They're better for clean air. They're better for the climate. They're better in terms of cost of ownership over the lifetime of the vehicle. They're better to drive. They're just better all round. And sooner or later, consumers will, as soon as they start to drive them en masse, come to that realisation.
No disrespect. Back in the real world, people worry about the range. They worry about the cost. They worry about the fact they can't blooming well plug them in anywhere. If they can, oftentimes it's much more expensive. And if you don't have off-street charging of your own, many people don't, particularly poorer people who might live in terrace housing, they're paying through the nose to the point where it's the same cost as a petrol vehicle, which, by the way, you can fill up in moments and won't ever let you down. People don't want these things, and they don't want to be forced into it by governments who are just going to punish them for it in the first place.
With all due respect, those are some tropes that are continually trotted out by conservative media. In the real world, 60% of people have access to off-street parking, to a charge point at home, which is really, really low-cost way of charging a vehicle.
So why are these cars flying out the showrooms then?
As I say, there's a bit of friction at the moment as we enter the early mainstream audience. There's a bit more work, I think, that everyone needs to do across the whole sector to communicate all the benefits of EVs. The media this year has been doing a terrible job of portraying them in a very negative way, and that needs to be counteracted by some really positive messaging about how great EVs are. So that's what my role is.
Well, go on, convince me to buy it. I've got a diesel car. I have to pay £12.50 to use it every day, thanks to ULEZ, thanks to Sadiq Khan. I was incentivised to scrap my perfectly good petrol car to get a diesel car by Gordon Brown's government. I went with it. I feel mugged off. Why should I get forced to buy a vehicle again that I don't want?
Have you ever driven an electric car?
Yes, I have.
And what was your experience?
I continually worry about it running out of juice. I worry about putting the heating on. I worry about putting the radio on. I worry about being able to get to my destination.
There are, this year, as of today, there are circa 71,000 charge points, public charge points in the UK. There are 8,000 petrol forecourts. So the amount of charging coming on stream, 40% of public charging, high-speed public charging, has been installed in the last year. It's a really positive picture.
Down my street, people are fighting over lamp posts.
And that's just come back to the economics. That's a £6 billion industry, which an organisation, Charge UK, the industry body for the sector, is championing, and that's really leading to massive growth in a whole new infrastructure sector for the UK.
Well, then you're putting a brave battle there.